3 years ago, an unusually sparse ad caught my attention while browsing local job classifieds online. It simply stated, "Job available, good pay, no benefits, discretion required," followed by an email address. At the time, I was managing a music store, but rumors of its impending closure had me bleakly searching for new opportunities. Bored and intrigued by the ad's brevity, I decided to reach out. Within half an hour, I received a response directing me to an upscale office building for a screening. After waiting in the lobby, I was handed forms and questionnaires to complete before being told they would contact me again. Nearly a month passed before I was called to the second stage of the hiring process. This time, the location was a different, elegant office park 20 miles away. There, a man named Mr. Solomon greeted me and escorted me to a large room resembling the workspace I would be expected to use if hired. The room featured a chair, a desk with 2 large monitors, a keyboard and mouse, and a bolted-down metal box with oversized red and green buttons. Solomon explained the job. I would work 7 6-hour shifts each week. My duties were straightforward: arrive 10 minutes early, store personal items in a locker, change into provided work clothes, and refrain from bringing anything personal into the surveillance room or taking anything from it. In the surveillance room, the left monitor displayed a live feed from a high-definition camera in a remote location, while the right monitor was a black and white terminal for logging brief notes about any significant events observed in the past hour. I was instructed not to take any written notes. The red button was for emergencies requiring outside help, and the green button was for highlighting noteworthy occurrences on the video feed. Solomon emphasized using the green button only for real significance. He pointed out a ceiling camera, revealing that my work would be monitored by others via a video feed. I was merely a backup in case other systems failed. When he mentioned redundancy, I nodded, masking my irritation. Communication wasn't my strong suit, and I often felt misunderstood. The pay was enticing, $35 an hour, but it made me suspicious. My mother's advice echoed in my mind. If something seemed too good to be true, it probably was. Curious and cautious, I asked Solomon if the job involved anything illegal or if anyone would get hurt. He laughed both times, assuring me it was a professional and discreet role essential for their important work, details of which he couldn't disclose. I had to sign non-disclosure agreements under threat of legal consequences if I revealed or questioned my duties. Despite my reservations, I accepted the job, feeling a mix of excitement and unease. The high pay and seemingly easy work were appealing, and I decided to push aside my fears. Upon starting, the real surveillance room mirrored the modelized scene, with minor differences like a small bathroom and a water cooler, though I couldn't bring anything personal in. The left monitor showed a bedroom-like room with a bed, TV, sofa, chairs, tables, and ample space. Initially, I saw nothing unusual, just a woman lying on the sofa, appearing to be asleep. I felt guilty, likening myself to a peeping Tom, but rationalized that I wasn't doing anything wrong. The room was nice, and the woman seemed to agree to be there, possibly part of an experiment. As days passed, I noticed the woman, whom I named Rachel, didn't leave the room voluntarily. Occasionally, men and women in strange outfits entered, took her away, and returned her later, sometimes gently and sometimes with her head hung low. These absences were troubling, but Rachel never appeared hurt or upset unless she was being taken. Despite no visible harm, I sensed something was amiss. The fear of losing my job and the potential repercussions kept me from acting on my suspicions. Solomon had stressed discretion and warned against asking questions or revealing my work. I convinced myself that Rachel was part of an experiment or needed help, believing I was protecting her by watching. Rachel often painted for an hour or two during my afternoon shifts. The room lacked windows, but she seemed to follow a schedule, either by a clock or her internal timing. I enjoyed watching her paint, noticing her peaceful expression and occasional serene smiles as she worked, which brightened my day. Despite my rationalizations, doubts lingered. The mysterious nature of the job, combined with Rachel's controlled environment, hinted at deeper, possibly sinister undertones. I grappled with the ethics of my role, torn between the lucrative pay and the unsettling reality of surveilling someone who didn't seem entirely free. My internal conflict grew as I witnessed Rachel's routine, the periodic removals, and her compliant behavior upon return. As weeks turned into months, the monotony of watching the screen weighed on me, but the glimpses of Rachel provided a strange comfort. Her presence was a puzzle I couldn't solve, and my inability to intervene left me feeling powerless. The high pay kept me tethered to the job, despite the nagging sense that I was part of something much larger and potentially harmful. One evening during a shift, Rachel didn't return. Panic set in as I stared at the blank screen, realizing I had no information on her whereabouts or well-being. I contemplated pressing the red button, but fear of the unknown consequences held me back. The silence of the surveillance room was oppressive, and the responsibility for her safety weighed heavily on me. The isolation of the job made it difficult to reach out for help or even confide in someone about my fears. Ultimately, I remained in the role, driven by a combination of financial need and the hope that Rachel was genuinely safe. The experience left me questioning the nature of the work and my complicity in whatever was happening behind the scenes. The high pay and initial simplicity masked a complex and morally ambiguous situation that I struggled to reconcile with my sense of right and wrong. Looking back, the job was more than just surveillance. It was a window into a hidden reality that I wasn't prepared to understand or engage with fully. My involvement had unintended consequences, blurring the lines between observer and participant in a scenario that was neither clear nor justified. The story of my time watching Rachel became a testament to the complexities of seeking stability and the unforeseen challenges that come with choices made in desperation. A few weeks into the job, I began to notice something unsettling about Rachel's behavior. Her painting became more frequent, her expressions more focused and serious, and her movements tense. Initially, I dismissed it as dedication, encouraging her to work hard. However, every few weeks, the others would remove the old paintings and replace them with new canvases. It wasn't just her intense focus. She no longer looked happy and was painting for hours on end. In just 3 days, she completed 4 paintings. My concern grew as I watched Rachel work tirelessly. After she finished the 4th painting, I urged her to take a break. Accustomed to conversing through the monitor, I tried to reach out, but she didn't stop. Instead, she began arranging her paintings on the back and seat of the long sofa at the room's far end. This was the first time I saw her artwork. Normally, when others took her paintings away, they were turned away from the camera, keeping me from seeing them. To my surprise, the paintings were beautiful. One depicted a lush green forest, another an old stone wall, a third a solitary house on a small island, and the last an old-fashioned movie theater. Each piece seemed dreamlike, with trailing lines of color intertwining like leaves in the wind. Upon closer inspection, I realized the colorful lines formed words, subtle, almost invisible, scattered across each painting. Leaning closer to the monitor, I squinted to decipher the words. My heart raced as I read them aloud in sequence. Please, help, me, Thomas. Shock paralyzed me. My name is Thomas. I recoiled, hand covering my mouth, unsure of what to do next. Should I press a button? The red button was designated for emergencies requiring immediate outside help, like police or medical services, not for something like this. The green button was meant for noteworthy observations, which this certainly was. Despite my hesitation, I felt compelled to act. Rachel was clearly reaching out for help. I glanced back at the monitor. Rachel was already moving her paintings as if acknowledging the message. She looked up, seemingly meeting my gaze through the camera. My resolve hardened. I couldn't ignore her plea. She wasn't bad. I had watched her for years and felt a connection, almost a friendship. Determined to help, I spent the rest of my shift contemplating my next steps while maintaining normalcy. The isolation of the job became more apparent. I had only interacted with Mr. Solomon during the hiring process and a couple of people when filling out paperwork. There were no other employees in the surveillance room, yet supplies like water, toilet paper, and soap seemed to deplete faster than I could use them. This led me to suspect that other surveillance rooms existed, possibly with other observers. If that was true, maybe I could reach out to them for support, though I had no direct means of communication beyond the buttons. After my shift ended at 8, instead of heading home, I parked my car down the street from the building and waited. The street was quiet, but anxiety kept me alert, fearing an SUV or van might pull up to abduct me like Rachel. Multiple times I nearly sped away, but reminded myself of Rachel's plight, feeling responsible for helping her. 2 hours later, a plump, balding man arrived and entered the building. Mustering courage, I approached his car to speak to him, but hesitated, realizing the presence of hidden cameras. Confronting him directly would reveal my intentions. Frustrated, I waited until his shift ended and he was returning to his car. This man was Charles Jeffries. Hey man, can I talk to you for a minute? I called out. He waved me off without looking. Sorry, I don't have any money. Have a good... He paused, glancing back nervously. Oh God, number, you need to get out of here, kid. We aren't allowed to talk. His fear was palpable, but I pressed on, pushing his car door open. So you know who I am? I demanded. trying to mask my frustration. He struggled to keep the door closed, but I held firm until he relented, his face showing exhaustion and dread. "Yeah, I know who you are. You work here just like me. And I'm telling you, we aren't supposed to be talking. We aren't supposed to meet ever." Confused, I responded, "Mr. Solomon never told me that. He never said it was one of the rules." Charles shook his head. "Mr. Solomon? Yeah. Well, there are plenty of rules they don't tell you. I bet they didn't tell you what you were going to be watching before you started, did they?" He sighed, lowering his voice. "Yeah, me too. I've been at this job for 10 years. I've seen other people come and go, usually because they broke one of those rules they never mentioned. The only reason I'm still here is because I keep my head down and my mouth shut. You should do the same if it's not already too late." "Too late?" I echoed, my stomach twisting. Charles looked around cautiously. "Kid, do you think they don't know we're talking? Do you think anything happens that they don't know about?" His voice was heavy with fear. "Hell, for all I know, you've already killed us both." He pushed the door open, retreating. "Either way, I'm done risking it. You need to stop asking questions and just do your job. It's a lot healthier." Left standing alone, I felt a mix of fear, sadness, and shame. Charles's warnings confirmed my deepest fears, but left me without a clear path forward. I returned to my car, conflicted about how to help Rachel. Approaching the police was risky, as they might be complicit, and obtaining proof on my own seemed nearly impossible. Back at my apartment, I grappled with my options. The high pay and the simplicity of the job were overshadowed by the moral dilemma of watching someone in distress without being able to intervene. Rachel's silent pleas haunted me, and Charles' warnings echoed in my mind. I realized that any action I took could have severe consequences for both of us. Determined yet uncertain, I decided to continue observing, hoping to find a way to help Rachel without jeopardizing my safety. The isolation of the surveillance room and the oppressive secrecy of the job weighed heavily on me, but my sense of responsibility towards Rachel kept me tethered to the role. Each shift deepened my understanding of the hidden realities I was part of, blurring the lines between observer and participant in a morally ambiguous situation. As I parked my car and entered my apartment building, I resolved to take action the next day. I planned to break the rules by bringing something into the surveillance room. I intended to use my phone to record a video of the room, Rachel and myself explaining everything I knew, then email it to every newspaper, website, and internet channel possible. If feasible, I would also approach the police with the evidence. The thought of helping Rachel outweighed my fear of being hurt or killed, though a voice in my head urged me to comply and hope everything would resolve itself. Distracted by these thoughts, I didn't notice someone approaching me until I unlocked my door. "Thomas?" I turned to see a woman who couldn't possibly be Rachel, yet looked unmistakably like her. My legs felt weak as I stumbled back, clutching the doorknob for support. "Rachel?" She paused before smiling. "Is that what you call me? I like it. My name is actually Melanie." Embarrassed but overjoyed, I asked, "Is it really you?" She nodded. "Yeah, it's me." Overwhelmed, I hugged her, and she returned the embrace before whispering, "Thomas, we need to talk, and not out here. Can we go inside?" Inside my apartment, we sat on the sofa. I forced myself to focus on the pressing question. "How?" Melanie's smile faded, replaced by worry. "Thomas, things aren't like you think they are. They never have been." Confused and fearful, I pressed further. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "You're part of a psychological experiment. I've been in it longer as one of the actors. It's likely run by a government agency, investing significant resources, but I'm not sure why." Realizing it was too much to believe, I felt a surge of doubt. Melanie continued, "You're being watched as a long-term subject. They created this scenario where you have a secret job watching someone, me, who appears trapped. They give you instructions and choices through buttons, right?" I nodded weakly. "Yeah, a red one and a green one." She sighed. "They're testing how much you'll obey based on your morals, intelligence, and fear. It was interesting when I joined 6 years ago, but now it's troubling. We, the other actors, sometimes hear things and gossip. That's what made me start feeling bad." "Other actors?" I asked. Melanie's eyes widened. "Yeah, sorry. They still call him Mr. Solomon, and there are others too." She explained, "I've been acting like a trapped girl for years, mainly faking painting or watching TV. The paintings you saw were already done beforehand. When they wanted to show you something, they arranged the canvases." I interrupted, anger and confusion evident in my voice. "You fake the painting? You aren't really painting those wonderful pictures?" She looked embarrassed. "No, sorry. I can't paint a bit. I'm a pretty good singer, though." She touched my arm gently. "That's why they always have the paintings turned away from the camera. They're already completed, and when they want to show you something, they arrange them accordingly." I felt a mix of emotions, anger, relief, embarrassment, and confusion. So all that stuff he told me, that was just to scare me? See how I'd react? She nodded, tears welling up. Yes, I'm sorry. That's why I had to contact you. When they started sending hidden messages and mind games, I got worried you might take it too seriously and get hurt or hurt yourself. After you left your shift tonight, I contacted someone in the video department. I saw you parked and almost approached you but was scared of getting caught and fired, so I waited until I could follow you and let you know I was okay. Her confession deepened my turmoil. Thanks, I guess. At least you stopped me from going to the police and looking like a joke. She looked up, eyes red. I know, I'm sorry. I was being selfish and cowardly, but I didn't actually leave. When I saw Charlie leaving the building and you talking to him, I knew they were escalating things. Charlie? I asked. Melanie rolled her eyes. Yeah, Charlie Jeffries, another actor. In an earlier version, he played Mr. Solomon, but they found him wasn't scary enough, so now he's usually in one of the suits. He's done that for your version a lot. You just can't recognize him under the disguise. I clenched and unclenched my hands, feeling like a pinball of emotions. So all that he told me? It was just to scare me? She nodded. Yes, that's why I had to tell you. I saw how worried and scared you were when you went back to your car. Pulling away, I said, well, thanks, I guess. At least you stopped me before I went to the police and looked like a joke. Standing up, I turned away, tears streaming down my face. I need time to think about everything. It's a lot. She placed a hand on my shoulder. Thomas, you don't have anything to be embarrassed about. They are very good at what they do. All you did was what you thought was right because you're a good man. I shrugged. Thomas, please don't do that. I don't think they would hurt us, but if you up and quit, they'll figure out I've talked to you. They might track cell phones, use spy satellites, whatever. I'm taking a big risk just being here, and I don't want them catching on. Stepping back, I responded, so you want to keep getting paid to trick people like me? She grabbed my right hand. No, I don't want to, but I wasn't expecting this. How the experiment has changed, getting to actually meet you. I can't do it long term, but maybe another month or two to save up money. Now that you're in it and won't be scared or hurt by it anymore, we can keep going like normal, take more of their money, and then one of us can quit. Next month, the other one can. How does that sound? Uncertain, I shrugged. It made some sense, and once I calmed down, it probably would make more. She squeezed my hand. And when this is all over, I want to get to know you better. I know I've been playing a role, but mostly that's been me you've been watching. I think it's only fair that I get to see more of you too. Feeling nervous, I responded, well, I mean, yeah, I would really like that. Swallowing, I added, how long do we have to wait to see each other again? Melanie grinned. Work another month or so. Save what you can, then quit. I'll wait another 2 or 3 weeks and then I'll do the same. And then, she paused, looking up at the ceiling, her beauty striking even in person. 3 months from tonight, we'll meet right here. I'll come over and we can start getting to know each other better. How's that sound? Returning to her smile, I nodded. That sounds great. After Melanie left, I felt a mix of hatred and relief. Exhausted and overwhelmed, I craved solitude to process everything. I barely remembered falling asleep and woke up to find my alarm had been buzzing for over 30 minutes. Hurriedly, I got ready for my shift, recalling Melanie's instructions to act as if nothing had changed. She had emphasized maintaining composure, not appearing too worried, yet not indifferent either. Her brief hug and kiss lingered in my mind, making it all feel like a surreal dream. Entering the surveillance room with a lighter heart, I no longer felt guilty about not helping Rachel. There was a sense of satisfaction in outsmarting those who had deceived me for so long. Knowing that in 3 months I would be free and could finally meet Melanie in person provided a glimmer of hope. Watching her on the video feed, she was asleep when I arrived and later reading a book, her peaceful demeanor making me smile, a reaction I had to suppress to avoid suspicion. An hour into my shift, Melanie began working on another painting. Her realistic movements and the apparent paint on her brushes amazed me. I felt proud of her acting skills. She had convincingly maintained her role, showing no signs that we had met or talked outside my apartment. As my shift neared its end, I prepared to leave, but then I noticed she was done painting. Instead of moving on to another activity, she carefully placed the canvas on the sofa. The painting depicted a massive tree with dark red bark and a twisting trunk branching into deep green leaves resembling storm clouds. Intricate details, including small blackbirds in the branches, caught my attention. The lines of color subtly formed words. That girl isn't me. I stared at the painting, my heart pounding as I realized Rachel wasn't just a trapped individual, she was sending a direct message. Rachel's terrified gaze met mine through the camera, triggering immediate panic. If Melanie was a fake, they knew about the hidden messages and my growing suspicions. They were aware I hadn't pressed any buttons during the interactions. Determined to help Rachel, I knew I had to act swiftly. Feeling the surveillance camera's gaze, I retrieved my phone from my locker, struggling with the combination, and began recording. I documented my identity, the surveillance setup, Rachel's presence, and my realization that she was a prisoner. Desperate, I attempted to send the video to my contacts, but the message indicated no connection to data service or Wi-Fi. Panic surged as Mr. Solomon entered the room with 2 large men in dark suits. "No service here, Thomas, but then you should never need service here so long as you follow the rules," Solomon taunted. The guards swiftly restrained me, applying zip ties and covering my head with a black bag. They loaded me into a van, and I struggled, demanding to know Rachel's whereabouts. Solomon laughed mockingly, assuring me he would explain everything once we arrived. He urged me to relax for the long drive ahead. A sharp pain in my neck signaled they had injected me with something. Disoriented but determined to stay awake, I fought against the haze, intending to escape. Suddenly, I found myself lying on a padded table in a large room that resembled neither a doctor's office nor the surveillance room. Mr. Solomon stood before me, a gun in hand. "Where is she? Is Rachel okay?" I demanded, struggling to rise. Solomon smiled menacingly. "You really are something, Thomas, trying to be the hero, even if you don't quite know how. I respect that." He leaned forward, his demeanor shifting from mockery to a sinister formality. "But before we get into the details, would you like to see Rachel? Reality is always best. She's just there in the next room." I nodded, barely able to steady myself. Solomon gestured toward a nearby door, and I struggled to remain upright as I prepared to confront the truth of my situation. I stumbled forward, my legs gradually regaining strength. Grabbing the doorknob, I expected Rachel's bedroom, but instead the door opened into another room resembling the surveillance area, though filled with unfamiliar equipment. Strange machines lined the walls, and at the back stood a large cylinder resembling an aquarium, filled with a gray liquid. Within it, a shape became discernible. "Go ahead, Thomas. Feel free to go have a good look. You've earned it," Mr. Solomon taunted, his voice dripping with malice. My stomach tightened and my legs felt heavy again, though not from the drugs this time. Shuffling forward, I realized the shape was a person's body, preserved yet grotesquely distorted, with hanging skin and bloated spots. The hair floated like seaweed around my face, and as I reached the glass, I saw Rachel staring back at me, lifeless and terrified. "Murderer!" I turned on Solomon and lunged toward him, but he shot me. Suddenly, I was convulsing on the ground as Solomon approached. "Don't worry, Thomas. It won't kill you. Just make you unable to move much for a bit." I heard more footsteps as my body began to stiffen. "Get him up. Take him back to the other room." Barely able to feel anything, I was carried back to the padded table and propped into a sitting position. This time, I was strapped down more securely, limiting my movement to just my head. Through my tears, I recognized Solomon sitting down again. "Before you ask, well, when you can ask anything again, yes, that is Rachel. Not a fake Rachel, not a dummy, and not some kind of trick. As I said, the time for tricks is past. Now is the time for truth." Frowning, he continued, "Thomas, I understand that showing you her body that way might seem very cruel. You may hate me for it right now, and I would understand if you did, but you called me a murderer, and in this specific context, that is unfair because I didn't kill Rachel. In truth, I've been with this aspect of the project for only 7 years. He gestured to the door behind him, and Rachel has been dead for over 8. My eyes widened in disbelief. More lies, more tricks. It couldn't be real. "Do you know what remote viewing is?" Solomon rolled his eyes. "Sorry, right? You can't talk right now. I'll just assume you don't. Remote viewing is the ability to see things far away physically and to know things you shouldn't be able to know through your normal 5 senses. Some describe it as a psychic ability, though there are several schools of thought on how and why it works." His eyes fixed on mine intently. "Because it does work, Thomas. Various governments and private organizations have studied it for a long time. Publicly, it's ridiculed as pseudoscience, but some people have the innate ability to somehow see other places naturally. Rachel was one of those people. She entered the program at 17, identified through a screening process as a good candidate. 3 months after being selected, she was taken, and after the initial adjustment period, she became a largely compliant asset, quickly rising to the top of our talent pool." Solomon folded his hands. "I know you cared for her, Thomas, so I think this is worth sharing. Rachel was never treated badly. Aside from her confinement and occasional mildly unpleasant tests, we all treasured her. She was enormously talented, not just as a remote viewer, but as an artist. That's how she conveyed what she saw, painting images and words that provided valuable information." He chuckled. "If you ever wondered, that's why the paintings were never shown to the camera." Picking at his pants, he continued, Rachel was so talented that she was selected for a new program to enhance her abilities. We introduced something foreign into her body. Initially, nothing seemed to change. If anything, her remote viewing accuracy was declining, which was a problem for us and her. But then we realized we were reading the new paintings wrong. She was able to see more clearly than ever, no longer bound to current events. Her sight transcended time. He paused, enjoying the dramatic effect. While this made some paintings less immediately useful, they became more valuable as we deciphered them. For a time, it seemed everything was working better than we had hoped. His lips thinned, and then one day, she showed a painting to the camera. It said, "Please help me, Thomas." This immediately raised red flags. She knew not to show paintings to the camera and was now trying to communicate with someone. We didn't disrupt her routine, but an intensive investigation began into who she was talking to, handlers, technicians, someone from her past, but nothing checked out. Leaning back, a look of pride grew on Solomon's face. I was the one who first suggested that she was, intentionally or not, seeing and talking to someone in the future. I was an outside consultant then, but by that point, we had more strange behaviors from her, including the second message painting. That girl isn't me. My theory made sense, but it quickly hit a greater obstacle. The foreign material wasn't as seamless as we hoped. Whether due to her increasing emotional stress or simply time, she began to deteriorate. Her work became erratic and hard to understand as her body declined. We monitored her health closely, but it didn't matter. 5 days after she painted, "That girl isn't me," she went into cardiac arrest and died. We couldn't resuscitate her. The man sighed. This was a great loss and required adjustments to my theory. Based on everything, it still made sense that she was talking to someone with access to the camera feed, likely someone named Thomas. If Thomas was viewing that footage in the future, then he must be working for us in the future. He gave a thin smile. Whether you believe the future is set or not, I'm all for giving it a helping hand. 7 years ago, I began the Thomas Project. Over that time, I've overseen the screening and hiring of 43 men named Thomas at various sites, all with one specific job: to watch the videos of Rachel from just before her implant to the time of her death. I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't move. I wanted to call him a liar, that it made no sense, that it was another trick. But part of me wanted to believe him, to understand. I struggled to watch, hoping to find clues that they were lying or that Rachel could somehow warn me. What I knew was that I couldn't miss the chance to see her again. Despite knowing she was dead, the point wasn't them watching the videos. It was how they reacted to the videos and how that matched Rachel's past responses. 13% quit after the first day. 38% hit either the red or green button after the first message asking for help and stating their name. 22% attempted to contact authorities before reaching the stage where Melanie was introduced. He shook his head. I wish I could take credit for her introduction, but it wasn't my suggestion. We assumed from the "that girl isn't me" message that a double of Rachel was introduced to you, perhaps to kill you, dissuade you, or find out what you knew. It took a few tries until it was well refined, and as I've pointed out, only 27% made it that far. All of them failed the next test. He pointed at me. Her name. You see, the girl you've been watching, the talented, wonderful girl whose body is preserved in the next room, her name was Rachel Donovan. I always wondered if Rachel was merely seeing you, or if there was a connection between the two of you. When you called Melanie Rachel, I knew we had finally found the right Thomas, the distant point of light our Rachel was looking at across space and time. I swallowed thickly, feeling my tongue. Slurring, I pushed out a single word. Why? Solomon looked surprised. I'd have thought that'd be clear by now. You're our only remaining link to one of our greatest treasures. Perhaps you have a similar ability, or maybe she forged the link purely through her talent and will. Either way, you are important and have more work to do. He stood and moved to the table, turning on the monitor. The screen displayed a frozen image of Rachel's room. A tape paused where I had left off watching. Turning back, Solomon looked solemn. You have to watch the rest of it. Rachel painted you more pictures before she died, and we have to know what they mean. I spent the next 5 days watching Rachel die. From the outside, it didn't seem different from the past 3 years. Rachel slept, watched TV, read, and painted, but subtle signs indicated her distress. She seemed more tired and tense, sleeping more, and occasionally glancing up at the camera with fear and sadness in her eyes. Inside, I felt like a burned-out house collapsing in on itself. Initially, I refused to comply, resisting their demands to watch the video. Solomon didn't react with anger. He simply shrugged and informed me that while cooperation was preferred for a more comfortable stay, it wasn't mandatory. His thin smile conveyed a chilling certainty. Things would unfold as intended. regardless of my choices. The video was about to resume and would continue playing for another 5 days, leaving the decision to watch it up to me. A long time ago, I believed that by watching, I was somehow connected to Rachel. She had been taken away at a young age, trapped, and treated like property for her special abilities. Despite her confinement, she remained beautiful inside and out. Over the years, I had grown to know her through countless small observations. Her kindness, grace, and unwavering strength. Her paintings, filled with swirling colors and elements of wonder, were expressions of her soul, created with love despite her harsh reality. Determined not to abandon her, I committed to watching every bit of the video I could manage, intending to memorize every frame for both of us. I wasn't doing this for them or their sinister project, but for Rachel and myself. Even if my time was limited before they either locked me away or killed me, I could do this one last thing: ensure Rachel wouldn't die alone. I watched nearly all of the footage, only pausing briefly to eat and use the bathroom until the last 2 days. Whenever I requested the guards to pause the video, they would deny it, citing Solomon's instructions to let it play uninterrupted. By the 4th day, exhaustion had set in. Waking up from a brief nap on the 4th day, I noticed 2 trays of food on the bed, one for breakfast and another for lunch. In a panic, I checked the screen, fearing I had missed something, but Rachel seemed to be waking up too. She clutched her stomach as she got out of bed, clearly in pain. Rachel glanced at the camera, attempting a smile before moving to set up a new canvas for painting. This was her second of 3 final paintings. The first depicted the interior of an old-fashioned movie theater from the perspective of someone in the back row, with a sledgehammer propped against a brick wall on the screen. Struggling to find meaning, I scanned the painting for hidden messages and discovered faint numbers: 2, 43, 26, 89. Confused and feeling inadequate, I struggled to understand their significance, fearing I was failing her. Rachel slept for a long time after that painting, then rose on the 5th day, the last day, and immediately began painting again. Her determination was evident as she slashed lines and colors across the canvas with increasing speed, occasionally wincing in pain. When she finished, she turned the painting toward the camera, giving me a small, tired smile before it was blocked from view. The painting showed the front porch of a country house at sunrise, with 2 hands tightly interlocked, their fingers glowing red and orange in the morning light. Tears welled up as I stared at it, feeling a mix of desperation and hope. The final painting seemed to convey a message of hope, that somehow, somewhere, everything would be okay. Outside the painting, I saw motion in the room as people hurriedly entered with medical equipment, and then the monitor went black. "You've done well, Thomas. Very, very well," Solomon began. "For the last 5 days of the video, we charted 1,047 micro-variations in Rachel's behavior that we believed corresponded to your behavior, reactions, and emotional states while watching the video. Like before, the 2 of you remained in sync as though you were in the same room. It really is remarkable." I stared at Solomon, numb and disinterested in his praise. I just wanted it to be over, whatever this was. Clearing his throat, he continued, "That's why we've decided to move the implant from Rachel's body to your own. That's one of the many reasons we've preserved her so well. The foreign object still showed signs of life, barely, and we were hesitant to remove it. We hope that, given your connection to Rachel, it will accept you, perhaps even thrive within you more than it did within her." I bolted upright, fury boiling inside me. "Don't you talk about her like that. Like any of you gave a shit about her. I'll kill you." Solomon's face darkened, his lips thinning. "No, you won't. But idle threats won't make things easier for you." Panicked, I demanded, "What is this thing you're going to put in me?" He looked at me thoughtfully before responding. "I'm tempted not to tell you after your stupid, and frankly, hurtful outburst, but I'll be a bigger person." He sighed and continued, "Thomas, somewhere there is a tree, a very special tree. We suspect it's the same tree Rachel painted for you, though we can't confirm since we've never found it. It's either well hidden or can hide itself from those it wishes." I glared at him, struggling to contain my rage. "In any case, we have the next best thing, an ancient clipping from the tree, secured at great cost and sacrifice. We've studied it for a long time without much success. Recently, we received advice that this clipping could be grown in the right soil. We thought Rachel was the soil, but she died before the necessary growth was finished." Leaning forward, Solomon smiled. "We have it on good authority that you might succeed where she failed." Despite my desperate attempts to resist, the guards overpowered me, and I was forcefully moved from the table. Moments later, I awoke with a dull ache in my chest and a small healing scar on my upper stomach. I didn't feel significantly different, but I knew that sensation would change over time. Perhaps I had more time than Rachel, or maybe less. Regardless, I felt an urgent need to act. Suddenly, a soft voice echoed in my mind. Unlike Rachel's, it was delicate, like a distant melody, a song from the back of my mind. Realizing it wasn't Rachel's voice, I shivered, recognizing it as the song of the entity now inside me. At first, fear gripped me, but it soon subsided. The voice wasn't trying to harm me. It was trapped here, just like I was. It began to sing, signaling that it was time for both of us to be free. Standing up, I walked toward the door, but the lights went out. The door in front of me clicked open effortlessly, defying logic. If the entity could open the door, why hadn't it helped Rachel escape? There was no time to ponder as I heard boots approaching the corner, the glow from flashlights illuminating the far end of the hall. They would drag me back in there, chain me up, or remove this thing from me before we could escape. If I was ever going to get out, it had to be now. The voice inside me sang again, urging me deeper into the darkness, pushing me to run until we were safe. So I listened, and I ran. Every door unlocked for me. Every turn kept me barely out of sight. The people searching for me barked orders over a radio, questioning delays with the generator kicking on. Regardless of their responses, the hallways remained dark as I drifted through them, blind but not falling, lost but not found. When I reached the final door, I opened it into a bright afternoon. My lungs burned from the first fresh, unrecycled air I'd breathed in a week. Blinking, I waited for the voice to guide me, but it had fallen silent. Panic rose in my chest as I closed the door, realizing that without direction, I risked getting caught. I stood outside a plain brown building in the middle of nowhere. To the right, a road stretched out. To the left was Rachel's forest, straight from her first painting. I knew it was the same forest immediately, not just for its resemblance, but because of a strange magnetism, like how birds instinctively know which way to fly. Looking around, I felt a pull toward the woods. This was right. Somehow I knew this was the path I needed to take. So I went. Reaching the edge of the forest, I heard the noise of men approaching the building. I contemplated hiding but knew it was futile. They would catch me. Driven to go deeper, I plunged into the woods, running at a reckless speed yet never stumbling. Occasionally, noises behind me signaled their search, but the sounds grew fainter. Just as I thought I might have lost them, a short cough muffled to my left. Someone had gotten close. Panicking, I searched for a place to hide. There were only bushes, trees, and over there, a well. Not just any well, but Rachel's well, with the same worn gray stone walls and a weathered wooden lid. A moment of happy recognition passed, but then I realized it offered no real refuge. They'd check it if they found it, and I had no way to descend without injury or getting stuck. Then an idea struck me. Crouching low and staying within the brush, I approached the well and gingerly pushed the lid. It resisted at first, but with more effort, the wooden circle slid aside enough to see someone moving it. Glancing around, I eased back into the bushes as soft footfalls approached. We need to check this out. You think he went down the well? Better hope not. He probably broke his neck if he did, and then it's asses. I watched the two men approach, both clad in dark body armor and carrying assault rifles. The older one shrugged at the younger one. Better that than he was hiding in there and we didn't check. Looking irritated, the younger nodded. I'll look. He shoved the lid aside, causing it to clatter to the ground. Hitting a button on his rifle, a flashlight sprang to life on the barrel. He began shining it into the well as the other man continued to scan the area. I feared he might spot me if I moved, but I couldn't stay hidden any longer. I had to remain calm, think slowly, and move fast. I kept expecting them to yell or feel something strike me from behind, but nothing happened. As the afternoon light began to dim, I saw the trees thinning ahead, a road. It looked like a normal public road, with several cars passing by as I walked out of the forest and up the hill to the asphalt. The idea of hitchhiking, especially so close to where they held me, was frightening, but I saw little choice. Wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt they had given me, along with my own shoes but with no money, ID, or phone, my only option was to get far enough away to seek help. I jumped slightly as a large semi rolled to a stop beside me. The passenger window lowered, revealing an older man with white hair and a graying mustache. You look lost, son. Do you need a ride? I glanced at the truck's door, adorned with the logo, Martinez & Sons, Construction and Hauling, featuring a cartoon man hitting a wall with a sledgehammer. Smiling, I replied, "Yes, sir, I do." 5 hours later, as we pulled into a truck stop in Nevada, exhaustion overcame me despite planning to stay awake. I glanced at Oliver Martinez, who gave me a toothy grin. I'm tired, but you were plumb tuckered out. I've got to fuel up, shower, and get some grub. I'm going on to California after that. If you want to ride further, just be back here in an hour. Sounds good? I nodded and thanked him again as I stepped out. Feeling groggy but otherwise okay, I needed to decide whether to ask for help here or continue riding with Martinez. He seemed nice and could help, but I wanted to avoid endangering more people if possible. Looking around, the town appeared fairly nice, so I decided to explore for a few minutes before making a decision. 3 blocks down the street, flickering lights caught my attention. It was a movie theater. As I approached, my chest tightened. It was the same one from Rachel's painting. "Hey there, welcome to the Phoenix," a young man at the candy counter greeted me. "If you're here for the horror double feature, I'm afraid the second movie is about 30 minutes in. I can give you a half rate if you want to see it though." I shook my head, trying to appear composed. "No, that's okay. I recognize this place from a picture a friend of mine painted, so I came in to ask if you knew anything about her." He raised his eyebrows and shrugged. "Okay, weird." He smiled and added, "Weird, but interesting. Who is she?" Swallowing, I said, "Her name is, it was Rachel Donovan." I expected a reaction, but the name meant nothing to him. Shaking his head, he shrugged again. "Sorry, that doesn't ring a bell. I'd say you could ask the owner, but he's on vacation this week." Nodding, I searched for another way to make this place matter like her other paintings had. "Is there anything unique about this place then? Is it history or something?" The man grinned. "Buddy, you're clearly not from here. This place is super boring. Not just the theater, but the whole town." He frowned thoughtfully. "The only thing I know about the history of this place is that there used to be a house here that burned down in the 1920s or 30s when this wasn't even part of town. Can't tell you much beyond that, but I still bet it's the most interesting thing that's ever happened here." I let out a disappointed sigh. "Okay, well thanks." As I turned to leave, he called out again. "Hey man, sorry I couldn't help more. If you come back, I'll get you a discount on a movie, half off. If I'm not working, tell them Marshall said it was okay." I waved and tried to smile as I headed for the door with a heavy heart. "Why did you lead me here, Rachel? What's here that will help?" Staring up at the theater's bright blinking signs, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. An alley ran alongside the theater, leading behind it to something. The light of a distant security lamp cast shadows along the alley walls, and those shadows were moving. Instead of feeling afraid, I felt excited as I started down the alley. Rachel had led me here, and I had to trust there was a reason. Keep looking until The shadows were merely leaves blowing in an unseen wind. At the alley's end, I saw a small backyard behind the theater, surrounded by a chain-link fence. On the other side stood the tree from Rachel's painting, deep red twisting bark and a foam of green leaves waving in the night air. A surge of warmth filled my chest as the distant singing began again. This was the place, the special tree that couldn't be found unless it wanted to be. It sat at the edge of a small overgrown lot, surrounded by buildings and yards, seemingly forgotten as the land was divided up. Despite its location, I felt a strong sense that I was the first to see it in a very long time. Climbing the fence, a jagged wire dug into my leg, ripping my pants as I fell over the top. I was bleeding slightly but hardly noticed. The rich, unique scent of the tree filled my nostrils. Reaching out to it, the singing grew louder as I touched the trunk. I felt stronger and less afraid, and when I saw the light opening up at its roots, I didn't tremble. I smiled. There was a hidden tunnel under the tree, filled with sweet-smelling air similar to the tree's scent but different. The tunnel wasn't dark. It glowed with its own golden light that beckoned me forward. Rain began to fall as I looked around the dark lot, contemplating leaving this world behind, and I found I didn't mind that much at all. The tunnel slanted down gently, tall enough for me to walk through without stooping. The tree's roots weaved through the dirt walls as I moved deeper. Looking back, the tunnel had closed behind me, but I wasn't surprised. The way forward was the only way that mattered. I stepped into the tunnel, leaving behind the darkness and the horrors I'd endured. The golden light enveloped me, guiding me toward freedom and a new beginning, finally escaping the twisted experiment that had bound me and Rachel for so long. I walked for what felt like hours, but I didn't grow tired or hungry, nor did I feel lost. Turning a corner, I saw a brick wall ahead. As I reached it, the wall faded, revealing a dimly lit basement. Scratched into the floor was the number 2. My heart raced, recalling Rachel's painting of the theater seats. Stepping out, I found myself in an empty house. Sunlight streamed through the windows as the sound of waves echoed nearby. Checking the house for clues, I found it completely bare, save for the number below. Outside, I discovered the house sat on a small, deserted island. Nearby, a tree stood, a part of the same tree from Rachel's paintings, the tunnels, and another world. Though I didn't think I was in my own world anymore, I felt strangely at peace. The texture of this place was subtly different, but not unpleasant. Loneliness soon set in, even with the tree's quiet presence, so I returned to the tunnels. The next house I reached had tools scattered about and 43 scratched into the floor. A sledgehammer leaned against the wall. Grabbing it, I continued deeper into the tunnels, feeling like my dad's old hunting hound, driven by a sense of direction I didn't fully understand. When the next wall faded, I stepped into a small basement. There, a woman wielded a broken bed leg, attacking the wall. My heart stopped. It was Rachel. Or was it? She looked older, less burdened by the sadness I had come to know. When she turned and saw me, her fear softened but didn't disappear. "Do I know you?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. She studied me, then asked, "You came out of the tree tunnel, right?" Relieved by an easy question, I nodded again. "Where did you come from?" she asked. Flustered, I explained everything. The surveillance job, the paintings, the experiments, the escape, the tree's pull, and finally how I ended up here with the sledgehammer. Rachel's wary expression softened into a smile. "Okay, I believe you," she said. She explained her story. An ex-boyfriend had tied her to the tree, forcing her to take his place in its strange symbiotic connection.